Story Talk is a series of conversations featuring different artists from around the world, especially curated for the 5th anniversary of Storyfest Singapore. I'm speaking to illustrator Annalisa Salis, currently based in Sardinia in Italy. Hi, Annalisa.
Hi, Kamini. Very nice to meet you, and many thanks for your invitation to the Storyfest Singapore. I'm very honored.
Annalisa, would you be able to tell us a little bit about yourself, your background with storytelling, with illustration, with visual arts, and how you got into this whole practice about illustrating different parts of stories?
Well, I've always loved stories, especially traditional stories, since I was young, since I was a teenager. So obviously, I only knew them from books at the time. Then I happened to go to Scotland for a master's degree, and there I found out the existence of the Scottish Storytelling Centre and the Scottish International Storytelling Festival. So it really opened my eyes to the fact, wow, stories can be actually told. There are people telling stories. And then, as you know, because this is where we met, I've been working for the Storytelling Festival for many years. So I had occasion to listen to many stories, to meet traditional storytellers, and to really know better what is like. So what traditional stories are, and how now I'm also able to tell if I read a story on a book, if it's been maybe tweaked or polished too much, or if it's actually you can almost hear the voice of the storyteller. And as for illustration, that went alongside my studies. You know, they were never art studies, apart from maybe a short watercolor course many years ago. But it's something I mainly developed by myself, and it has always accompanied me all the time. So it's my practice, it's my special thing. And obviously, because I love stories and I love drawing, they very often merge together. So especially in the last years, either because of personal projects or because I was commissioned the development or illustrations for folktale books, the two things really went hand in hand.
So, Annalisa, basically, you were self-taught and you taught yourself how to become a watercolor illustrator. And in this process of, illustrating stories, folk tales, mythology, and working with oral tradition, can you share with us an experience, perhaps an unusual experience or something that is memorable to you, maybe working with an author or working with stories in general, something that you'd like to share with your audiences?
I read in a book a long time ago that drawing is a bit magical. So in the primitive time, people thought that they could draw very well an animal on a stone wall, then they would manage to catch the animal. So I was always kind of smiling to these, beliefs, obviously. But I actually something that then when you start drawing, and especially when you work with stories, you realize that there is actually some strange connection sometimes. I should say that I work a lot with my intuition. So it's not that I listen or I read a story and then I activate my logic side and I think about, okay, it's best to illustrate this way and this other way. And it's very intuitive. So very often I left the image that just surface in my mind. And once it surfaces, sometimes I just have to draw that. I don't know if it's the right way of working, but this is my way, at least so far. So, yes, sometimes there are some unusual situations. So, for example, I always tell this story within the story. When I was working on a book dedicated to Scottish folk tales by Donald Smith, so we agreed that I would just focus on very small elements for each story. So, and I decided to work on elements that were somehow recalling reality elements. Even if the story there was magic going on, I would just always pick a really humble element from reality, such as a bird or a plant or something like that. But then in the story, there was an element that to me was magic, and it was the element of hares dancing in the moonlight. And it was like, okay, I don't want to pick this element because it's too magical. So I would like it to be coherent with the other images I'm developing. But then I was kind of haunted by this image, these hares dancing at night. It was just so amazing. So just by curiosity, I started Googling, looking on the internet, okay, hares jumping, hares dancing. And to my own amazement, there is a period in March. This is why they say the mad hare of March. So there is a period in March where hares, I think both males and females, they actually stand on the two legs, on the rear legs, and it's like they are boxing. So it's kind of a mating, obviously, ritual. So I would imagine that this element of reality was somehow absorbed into the story, and it was turned into some kind of a magical, imaginative element of dance that are dancing. So to me, it was just amazing because it's like something that was sounding magic in the story lead me back to discover something that was actually very real. And this is how then I decided to also illustrate that, and actually became the illustration in the book. And yeah, there are some other times that there is the opposite. For example, there was a time very recently I was working on another book of folktales, and there was a frog. And I know this may seem very banal because it's not a frog or so unusual, but I mean, I never ever see frogs in the garden that we have here. So I was illustrating this frog. I actually had to illustrate it a few times before I was happy with that. And a few days later, a real frog appeared at my door. And again, it was so strange. So it's really strange, when you work with stories, the fact that there is this, intersection between the story back to reality and vice versa as well.
And it's almost like, as an illustrator or a visual artist, when you represent elements of a folk tale or a story, you are giving life because you're giving shape and form and color and texture. It's almost like giving voice to it and this ability to manifest, like the frog that appeared, in your garden when usually you don't see them. So this comes to, my next question about the technique that you use. I noticed that it's predominantly watercolor. Would you be able to share a little bit more about your technique and, why you choose watercolor as your main medium?
Yes, well, probably the choice of watercolor is a bit, I don't know, there is not maybe a starting point, maybe it's a bit of a by chance. Because when I was small, I was given a set of watercolors at some point, so I started working with them. And then I tried to develop more the practice, taking some classes really many years ago. And then I just stick with it. So it's like I never really got used to work with dense colors, although I'm very fascinated by them. But yeah, my word is water, pigments, and water. I get to say that I slightly moved on from watercolor now because I also work a lot with gouache, which is a bit of an opaque watercolor, and I really like them because they have a texture that is a bit chalky, I would say. So sometimes it creates effects that are not fully wanted, and are still quite enjoyable. So it's strange because you really start to learn specific colors, really the specific shades. Sometimes they have their own personality. So for example, the ultramarine blue, sometimes it surfaces back up after it dries. So these are all things that really fascinates me a lot.
So when you talk about, illustrating elements of folk tales and, different kinds of stories and different people that you work with, you also do a lot of this for yourself. I notice, that your own interest and your own passion in stories and bringing to life certain characters, certain elements, certain scenes. And your Instagram profile is amazing. I love looking at, I love waiting for your next image to come up and your little story about the character in that story. What are some of the kinds of challenges that you face, when you think about illustrating stories and depicting them and giving them dimension and giving them color and shape and presenting them, personally as an artist? What are some of the challenges that you have faced?
First of all, I try not to be banal. I think this is my first worry. So, for example, I happened recently to make an illustration dedicated to Thumbelina, or maybe to stories that are most well known. I always try in those cases to look for what has been represented before by other artists or illustrators, and then I try to make something different. So this is maybe, quite of a concern. I don't want to go to the classic way of representation. And for example, for Tambellina, I noticed that the majority of artists, she was blonde, blue eyes. My Tambellina has got black hair and she's wearing a red dress because she comes from a pop, at least in this version of the story, she's coming from a poppy flower, and the poppy flower normally is there are black center and then very red. So the different Tambellina. I always try to not to stick to the title if possible. So if, I don't know, a story is called the Black Bull, I didn't use a black bull to illustrate it. Obviously, all the examples I'm mentioning now, we are talking about those works where one story was illustrated with one illustration. A different challenge that I'm facing now. So for the first time, and this is a personal project, I was illustrating one story with one image. I'm now facing a new challenge with a new project, which is personal, where I'm illustrating one traditional story with many images. So it's like an actual book. But the challenge in this case is that there is no text. So I only need to intrigue, to invite the reader, the person looking at the story, to turn the page just because the illustrations are intriguing enough that they want to turn the page, and hopefully the memento will be kept all the time. So again, this is new, and I noticed that in one of your questions that you shared with me, you were also wondering, how do you strike the balance between the audience imagination and the need to tell the story? So this is actually an experience that will lead me to actually work on this. On the one side, I need to tell the story and I need to be good because there is no text accompanying it. At the same time, I don't want to feed the audience with the full details of everything. So for example, is a Sardinian story. I don't want it to be too Sardinian. I would like people who never been to Sardinia or don't know where it is. So I wanted to still be able to enjoy the story, to relate to that. And for doing this, for example, I'm leaving parts of the images are just like a silhouette, I would say. There is a lot of monochrome, and I'm working a lot with the negative space, so that there are maybe some shapes in the background that if the audience has quite a lot of imagination, they can maybe steal profiles of fairies or maybe something that they want to put in the story themselves.
This reminds me a lot about, the non-verbal communication tools that storytellers use, where it really is about explaining things and demonstrating and presenting parts of the story without words. So it's similar to having a series of illustrations that are telling the story, but there are no accompanying words to it. So I find that it's harder to do, of course. It really is a challenge, and it makes you think as an artist and as a storyteller, how best can we share the essence of what happens next and what is continuity with, in your case, just a series of images, and in a non-verbal communication scenario, with your hand gestures, with your expressions, with your, just looking at the audience and eye contact. So I find that similarity really intriguing, and it's a good challenge. So Annalisa, is there anything that you're currently working on that you'd like to share with us? Something upcoming, a project that you're working on, or some kind of, a series of images that we can look forward to seeing?
So first of all, soon there will be the launch of the book that I finished illustrating in the end of February, and it's called Folktales from the Garden. It's written by Donald Smith, and it will be published by History Press. So hopefully in June it will be released, so there will be a print version. I will be happy to share any links with you about this. And then, as I was mentioning before, something that I, in between the many maybe commissions or other illustration projects, my main aim for this year is to complete this project I was talking before. So about illustrating one Sardinian story with several images and in a book that has no text. So this is something I already have a clear idea of the storyboard. So the full book is already in my mind. So I just hope I will have, time alongside other things to keep on developing it.
Thanks so much, Annalisa, for sharing, all about your visual storytelling experience and your practice. I've been speaking to Annalisa Salis, visual artist based in Sardinia in Italy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kamini. It was really a pleasure to have a chat with you. And thank you to all the team.
Thank you. So if you'd like to find out more about the Story Talk series and to listen to interviews with storytellers from different parts of the world on very many different topics, stay tuned and follow us on our social media and watch the rest of the series on YouTube.